With the lack of privacy in today's culture and risk of being canceled, we created this podcast to give people a chance to share their stories with complete transparency and honesty with total anonymity. With that said, welcome to Animals Anonymous. I'm one of your hosts, Horrible, that's with the W, and I am a fox.
And I'm your host, Doggo, and I'm a black lab. And we are both enjoying a gin and tonic. And we're here to welcome you and our guest.
Hi, I'm Chicharonita, and I am a pig. I'm enjoying a nice cold glass of stout.
Hi, Chicharonita.
And what do you do for a living?
I am a forensic engineer. And that is, my title is actually professional engineer. I am a licensed professional engineer in the state of Florida.
Now, you said you're a professional engineer, and I'm curious, now in Florida specifically, is it any more difficult to be a professional engineer in Florida versus another place? Like, what is the process of that?
So I don't know what the process is in some of the other states. However, throughout the country and in Puerto Rico as well, which is a territory, not a state, so I'm just clarifying, we all take a standardized exam that is only provided twice a year, and you have to pass that test after having completed education requirements based on the state. So every state has their own requirements for their education. The test is standardized, but the way that it is graded varies from state to state. So some states have higher requirements, and every state has their own board of professional engineers, and that board will go through the questions that are on the test, and they'll throw ones out that they don't think are good, and it's not very transparent as to what grade you actually have to get on the test in order to pass. They simply tell you if you've passed or failed. And if you fail, they tell you a little bit about which questions you got wrong, or like really more the general scope of like the categories. And so I would say that I know some people who have gone to other states to get their professional license because the grading was easier. And then they could get reciprocity to the state of Florida. So reciprocity is where you have your professional license in another state, and you just go to the Board of Professional Engineers in Florida, and you say, hey, I have my license, and I can get my license. Can I get my license here in Florida?
Which state should we cheat? Like, which state should we go to actually get the engineer degree the easiest for us lazy folk out there?
For the lazy folk out there, I would say the person that I know who went to another state because they failed in Florida so many times, the state they went to was Michigan. So whether or not that is the easiest state, I personally passed in the state of Florida, so I don't know. I never examined those avenues. However, I will say that being an engineer in California is actually harder if you're a structural engineer. So my background, I am a civil engineer, and in my education there was an emphasis in structures.
Well, when your structures are shaking in California, it's much more difficult.
Exactly. So in order to be a structural engineer and practice engineering of structures in California, you also have to pass what's called the structural engineer license exam, and that's the SE. It is another test that's a 2-day test. The professional engineer licensure test is only 1 day. It's 8 hours, and it covers a broad spectrum of topics that are all related to whatever engineering discipline you are taking in. So there are many different types of professional engineers, not just civil engineers, but I am a civil engineer. It's complicated, but it is what it is.
So you're a woman in this very masculine dominating career. So what are some unspoken social requirements that you could speak of?
So some unspoken social requirements would be don't be a woman. Yeah, so one thing I would say is if your coworkers feel that you are being too emotional, that can negatively affect the way you work together. And so because it is a male-dominated field, I have found in my experience that some companies are very welcoming and they have more women. They have a higher percentage of women. And other companies where there's a very low percentage of women, you can run into issues of a traditional boys club with any male-dominated field, where you have men who all have the same truck, who all go golfing together, and they all have their own little clique that you will never be a part of because you are a woman. And so that's not really something you can control. No matter how good of an engineer you are, they may still respect you. However, your advancement opportunities in that particular company may not meet your male colleagues. But generally, you still get treated with respect for the most part.
Now, is there anything that you've done that you found that helped break some of these glass ceilings or glass doors or whatever level of the glass we're talking about here?
I did not have children.
Ooh.
That's an interesting one.
Like, let's talk money. And also, maybe since you mentioned difference between boys and girls, one, what is the expected salary you could probably start off with? I'm guessing you entering in before you get this PE certification. And then two, I have a follow-up. Have you noticed the difference between male and female? Like, is there that, is all the hype up about, like, the difference between male pay and female pay real in your industry?
So I would say, one, a bit of context that you need. I entered the field in 2013. So I entered the workforce 10 years ago. So my numbers of what you can expect when you enter the field are very different from what people would expect now. I do know someone who entered the field about 5 years after I did, so I do know that the numbers changed. But when I entered the field, I started at $55,000 per year. That's in 2013. One of my friends, who is also a female, she entered the field starting at about, I believe it was $65,000. Now, I have my master's degree, so that is also another piece of context that you need to have, because people with their master's degree typically get paid about $5,000 more for an entry-level position. Now, you have to understand, in 2013, when you're coming out of college, remember the crash in 2008. So in 2013, the job market was not as hot. I only interviewed for 2 positions, and I was only offered 1. So there was no real way to negotiate at that point. You take what they're offering you because that is the job that you can get. So a bit of context. Throughout, how much you can make is very based on how desired you are as an engineer. Now, 10 years into my field, I am now making $105,000 per year. I get my health benefits included without any copay. I pay my copays. I don't have to pay any premiums. So I don't, that's an added bonus of maybe $2,000 to $3,000 per year. However, as far as whether or not I get paid the same as my male colleagues, I don't know, because no one talks about their salary. This is not something that is well known. Now, when I was in design, I would talk to some of my female colleagues because we were very transparent with each other about what we were making. Now, I know that back when I was in design, I was making more than the woman who had a child, probably about $10,000 per year more than the woman who had children. So that's one reason that I say that not having children actually brought me closer to the men, because they did not see me as someone who had priorities that were different from theirs. Because my male colleagues, when their wives would have children, would take one day off of work. When my female colleague had a child, she took 3 months off of work. So you have to understand there's a very big difference between 1 day and 3 months as far as planning and understanding from a business aspect how challenging that is for the bosses. However, that is not an excuse. I honestly think that there should be male and female required leave, but that's not really something, that's not something that you can force.
Working late nights is not really an option. Getting that opportunity to work overtime is not an option if you have kids to attend to. And usually, unfortunately, that we live in a society where that falls on the female more than the male, right?
Exactly. And that was another reason why. So I routinely was the first one in the office and the last one to leave. Pretty much every job. So when you're the first one in and